Thank you. I'd like to thank the gentleman from Colorado, as well as Leader Pelosi and Whip Hoyer, for their unyielding support for thousands of American jobs and businesses. I rise to urge my colleagues to defeat the previous question in order to force a vote on legislation sponsored by myself, Mr. Heck, Ms. Moore, and Mr. Hoyer, and 186 other Democrats that will renew and reform the Export-Import Bank's charter for the long term. Mr. Speaker, Congress has just 5 days to act before the Export-Import Bank shuts down. We're in the 11th hour, and despite a recent bipartisan vote in the Senate and broad support across the aisle in this House, we're still fighting to keep this engine of job creation and economic growth alive. It's interesting to note that contrary to most of the disagreements that take place in this chamber, in the debate over the Export-Import Bank, the facts remain undisputed. Over the past 5 years, it is estimated that the bank has created or sustained more than 1.3 million private sector jobs, 164,000 in the past year alone. In 2014, the bank returned more than $674 million back to the American taxpayers, an amount totaling $6.9 billion over the past 2 decades. Democrats, Republicans, business and labor all understand the important role that the Export-Import Bank plays in our economy. And presidents ranging from Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush to Bill Clinton have been outspoken in their support for the bank's ability to create and sustain American jobs and keep our businesses competitive. EXIM levels the playing field with countries like China, Russia, and countless others, all of which have their own version of the bank supporting American competitors. Mr. Speaker, Democrats are coming to the floor today to implore our numerous Republican colleagues who support the Export-Import Bank, starting with Speaker Boehner, to stand up for jobs, businesses, and American competitiveness by standing up to the extremists who want to close the bank. Let's send a strong message to America's manufacturers, businesses, and workers that we are committed to preserving an institution that for decades has helped this nation create jobs and grow the economy. So I would urge a no vote on the previous question, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose the previous question so that we might indeed get to House Resolution 1031, the Promoting U.S. Jobs Through Export Act of 2015. 1031, which, as has been indicated, reauthorizes the Export-Import Bank, is a deficit-cutting, job-creating machine. And why is it important that we get to it? Because, indeed, the charter of the bank expires in 5 legislative days. You know, last week I was at home and I had occasion to be channel surfing, and I came across inarguably one of the top 10 movies in all of the history of American cinema, Blazing Saddles. And there's this wonderful scene where the actor Cleavon Little rides into town, and he's not met very favorably by the townsfolk. They all pull their guns on him. And in response, he pulls his revolver out and puts it to his head, and he says, "Stop, stop, or I'll shoot myself." Well, of course, what he was doing, given the situation, was completely turning logic on his ear and confusing everybody in his presence. And that's how I feel about this. Those who want to end the Export-Import Bank purport to be in favor of cutting the deficit. But the Export-Import Bank has reduced the federal deficit by $6 billion over the last 20 years. Those who want to terminate the Export-Import Bank say they're in favor of faster economic growth, but the Export-Import Bank supported 164,000 jobs just last year alone in virtually every congressional district in this great land. Make no mistake. If the bank expires, we will lose jobs, and we will lose jobs immediately, here and there and everywhere. And stop and think about that. What is more important than a job? It is the means by which we provide for ourselves. We are self-sufficient. Is anyone suggesting we have too many jobs? Is anybody suggesting that work isn't worthwhile? I'll never forget when Former Vice President Mondale once said, I'll never forget when former Vice President Mondale once said, you want to know how important work is in this society? Stop. Ask yourself what the first thing you ask somebody when you meet them. What do you do? Work is important. Jobs are important. The Export-Import Bank creates jobs. Vote no on the previous question. Reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. 5 legislative days to go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Colorado for yielding. I rise today to speak in opposition to the previous question in order to make in order a vote to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. For Americans, the Export-Import Bank means jobs. It means economic growth. Failing to reauthorize EXIM threatens American jobs, threatens American businesses, threatens our economy. Supporting EXIM used to be a bipartisan issue. Just read a little history. Dwight Eisenhower supported it. Ronald Reagan supported it. If you want a more recent example, George W. Bush supported it. This never has been a partisan issue until just recently, where even the House leadership, the Speaker, I think, supports it, has now been captured by a small group of very far right-leaning ideologues to whom apparently much is owed because we can't get a floor vote on a piece of legislation supported by a majority of the House of Representatives that helps American business and helps American workers. What's wrong with this picture? This makes no sense whatsoever. The Export-Import Bank is an essential part of a growing economy and particularly supporting American businesses to grow their exports and put Americans to work. In my home state alone, 228 companies, $11 billion in export value, are at risk if we don't reauthorize the Export-Import Bank, and we have 5 days to do it. Well, we could do it in 5 minutes. If we defeat the previous question, bring to the floor of the House legislation, H.R. 1031, that would reauthorize the Export-Import Bank through 2022. Let's let the will of the American people, and frankly, the will of a majority of the United States Congress, be manifest in our policy. A majority of Congress supports the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank. Bring a vote to the floor of the House, and let's put America to work, support American business, support American workers, support the Export-Import Bank. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Wisconsin is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. You know, the clock is ticking on the global competitiveness of U.S. workers, and the GOP has yet to put to a vote the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank. The Export-Import Bank levels the playing field globally for U.S. businesses to compete with subsidized foreign competitors. Our U.S. exporters and workers will pay the price if this majority, this Republican Congress, fails to reauthorize the bank. My Milwaukee exporters will pay the price if this Republican Congress fails to reauthorize the bank. Yes, deals will still be made with the other 60 or so credit agencies around the world, but they will be done without U.S.-made goods and services. You know, it is so ironic that we have all kinds of deals being cut to get partnership trade agreements with these Pacific countries, 12 different Pacific countries, so that we can export jobs to other places in the world. But there are no deals being made so that we can export U.S.-made goods and services to other parts of the world. That is probably why we have such a huge trade deficit. With the leadership of Ranking Member Waters, Representatives Heck, Hoyer, and I, we've introduced H.R. 1031, the Promoting U.S. Jobs Through Exports Act. It makes targeted and prudent reforms to the bank that enhances its mission including promoting additional small business participation, greater transparency, and improved governance. Defeat the previous question. Bring the Import-Export Bank bill to the floor. The American people deserve an opportunity to work. And I yield back.